All right, and welcome back to another Conquest Corner. This one, again, part of the series for tactics. I did a video, actually just about 24 hours ago, and in that video we were talking about the sizes of regiments, so how many stands to take, and the discussion there was, whether you go small, large, in terms of breaking / shattering the numbers and all. And we went through TTS a little bit just to kind of take a look at some of the pictures. And what I wanted to do with this particular video is I want to discuss just sort of the overall thought process I have related to where to bring my units. Now, again, this is probably a little bit more geared towards someone who is either newer to wargaming, newer to rank and flank type games, or just likes to hear someone else's thoughts on this. If you are some, crazy high level player, I might not be telling you anything that's brand new or different than what you think. But especially if this is something that you're not as comfortable with or as used to, might be able to give you some thoughts to have in terms of what to try to do, or at least what I try to do. Now, let's be honest, all this is very situational. Depending on exactly what your opponent is doing is going to change your overall strategy. So I'm going to present it more as some thoughts as well as a little bit of scenarios of what we would do. The other thing we're going to do, not in this, but something else I'm working on right now. Like I said, I did record a battle report with Steve the other week. Unfortunately, his audio didn't work. I'm not entirely sure why. I think just the mic cut out, just something weird happened. But that means for all intents and purposes, can't release it. Not the way it is. You can't hear him. If it was the other way around, you'd be able to hear me because I'm very loud. But unfortunately, you can't hear him. But what I wanted to do with that then is I wanted to do a very quick abbreviated version of that. So take the video I have and speed it up and chop it apart and talk about decisions that were made, say especially a decision on my end, why I made some of the choices that I did, and to kind of condense down the format there. My hope is that for future battle reports, when we record them for Conquest, to be able to release the full thing for anyone who wants to watch the full thing. I know at least me personally, that's usually the way I like to consume battle reports, because I prefer, the banter in between, or a little bit more the downtime to kind of really kind of be able to sit, because I don't usually watch battle reports if I'm not hobbying or doing something. So I like to have it on. I can hear that things are happening, look up a little bit, kind of get a perspective on it, and then continue and just kind of listen. But I also want to release them in a shorter format, just kind of discussing the overall of what happens, really trim it down. So we're going to try that with one of those. So we're going to discuss it here. But there's going to be another one releasing hopefully early next week. Might be sooner than that. I don't know. Kind of depends on how everything goes. For anyone who watched our other video, I had my MRI today. I have no idea what it's going to say. I looked at it. Everything looked okay to me. I can't necessarily read them, but I'd like to think I could tell if something was horribly wrong. But most of the pain is kind of gone for the moment. It was really bad getting ready for my MRI. It was bad in the car ride to the MRI. And when I was sitting there waiting for it to happen, kind of dissipated. I don't know. Maybe the thought of that scared my body and said, hey, you know what? We need to shape up. Not really sure why, but I'm happy about it. So that's why I'm sitting much more up for this particular video. Now, as we get into our talk of Conquest, as I will always shill, because hey, why not? It's what helps keep the lights on. If you are looking to purchase anything for Conquest, we do have a discount code. It's Terrain Kickers. You can find it in the show notes beneath as well. Saves you 10% on anything you buy from Parabellum Store. They just showed the new Talos model. We know there's a couple new models coming out somewhat soon, either for Sorcerer Kings. We know Spires is getting some stuff. We know there's some other we know Dweg are getting it at some point. I don't know when some of those other ones are coming out. What's Magnum Forged or whichever ones it was. I'm not great at all the names of everything. There's so many units. But if you're looking to pick up any of those, if you want to get them from the web stream, it can save you 10% using our code. I said, helps you guys out, saving 10%, helps us out as well, keeps the show running, keeps us being able to do all of this. I said the next thing I want to do is I want to upgrade the camera that we use to use something nicer. So all those sorts of things, it really helps make sure that we can actually do and create content, because it is something I like to do. I do really enjoy it, but there's expenses. There's absolutely expenses attached to all of this. So not even just time. All right. So as we said for this particular video, the goal is to discuss a little bit of where to bring units on, thoughts about both where to bring them, when to bring them, all of that sort of thing. Now, in a previous video, we talked a little bit about when I make some of those choices. There are units that need to come in earlier. There's absolute units that need to come in late. And we're going to talk about all of that, essentially, again, to an extent, maybe a little bit differently, but we're going to talk about all that here. So we're going to pull up TTS so that way we have that to mess around with as we think about it. Now, for this, I'm using some 100 Kingdoms on this side. I have some Draghome on this side. Playing as the 100 Kingdoms. The Dwag are essentially there for spots when I need to have some enemies on the board to discuss the thoughts related to that. I did put 3 objectives down, keeping it nice and simple. I know the missions don't necessarily look like this. We can also talk about what happens if there's an objective to destroy. But I just put some zones down. They're all roughly about 12 to 13 off of the edges. I don't care how far apart they are from each other. That's not really the concern for the moment. And if anyone plays A Song of Ice and Fire, that's what the terrain is actually from. I just grabbed it because I have that mod as well, because that's another game that I play. Apparently I play a lot of rank and flank games. But that since it's another one I have, it was able to let me grab some terrain very quickly. Now, first thing to notice about this particular scenario, like I said, the objectives are about 12, 13 inches up, which means for your base type units that are moving 10 plus banner, 11 inches, at least a lot of my units tend to, you're not getting objectives the turn you come in. Or even if you are, maybe you're just reaching the cusp. Maybe this one is exactly like just about 12, so maybe it's a tiny bit closer, so you're able to touch it. So that is a thought as well. What that often means, if say we take this unit here. So, say we got our guys right there. Oh, does it have to be? That's weird. Give me 1 second. The buttons weren't there. If anyone hasn't used this app before, when you click on the tray, there's a spot about showing the buttons. When you show the buttons, that's how you can lock and unlock. Because the one thing about this particular app, if you lose a model, you have to actually unlock, remove it, shrink the size of the tray, and lock it again. It's a little fiddly, but it's not too bad. But this will help me pivot more and all. So, say you got this unit of Household Guard. They're only going to move, say, that 11 inches. You know they're not going to get to an objective. But at least in the beginning, that's kind of their goal, especially if we're thinking about, say, a smaller unit. Say we have these guys here. Let me get their buttons on. I guess I need their buttons. Because the other thing you'll notice is, without the buttons, you actually... Why is that not working? That's fine. You usually can't even... It doesn't show you too much information. You can tailor it to do it, but that's all right. For some reason, that's not wanting to work. So we're looking here at, say, a unit of militia. These guys are moving their 5 plus 1, getting to their 11. That means they're not going to make an objective, so that means if they're the ones that are coming on, their goal is to walk an objective. This is an objective holding unit. That's all I want them for. So I'm going to line them up almost either squarely on the objective, or if there's a reason I don't want to, maybe a bit off to the side. So if I'm looking at, say, bringing these Household Guard in, if I want to put them anywhere towards the middle, yeah, I'll put my objective holder towards the edge, because what can happen when they move a little more forward, now they can be grabbing the objective. They can be facing maybe the main concerns that the enemy force has, if they're looking at anyone in this particular direction over here. I notice they have a piece of terrain here, which is helping out protect their flank a little bit, because if an opponent goes through that, in general, they're not going to get their impacts, they're not going to get inspired, all of that. So it's giving me at least a few bases on there, and if I'm worried about that flank hit, I'm only getting 2 on there anyway, I might as well back up and get the 2. That way it guarantees that you're going to be going through this forest, or whatever the other terrain feature would be. So for my objective holders, when they come on, I find for myself, now, if you're playing, say, Nords, that's another story, because you have so much Vanguard, so much flank, so much ability to come in when you want, getting that extra move. You're probably grabbing the objectives the turn you come in anyway. Then your objective holders coming down early matters. And it matters because you tend to be an early scoring army. And then, because I find you don't necessarily win the attrition game in many ways, you want to score early, hit the opponent to lower their ability to score, and then try to, win early rather than win late. Some other factions, say 100 Kingdoms, when I'm thinking Old Dominion, all of those, I find their basic scores tend to hit a lot later. There's other units I want. Not really worried about the scoring on the first turn that I'm able to. I know turn 2 I won't be able to, because my units won't get far enough, generally. Unless you got, like a mission where the objective is sitting right near the edge. But otherwise, I know I'm not going to reach it. So I'm not concerned. If they are on it by turn 3, I'm happy. Or if instead it becomes turn 4, I'm fine with that as well. one of these units. So here's what I mean. This unit's goal, these militia, their only goal is to score an objective. They're going to sit on objective and hopefully live long enough to get me some points. That's all I want them for. Whereas these household guard, this giant 9 brick with a character in there, so an 8 brick with a character, their goal is to go actually do something. Whether in this case, potentially eat a charge to allow someone else to hit to the side, say one of these mounted units, whichever one it may be, or to push onto an objective opponent's on and just have more bases than they do. So could be on a further back objective, but we'll show it here. Just, I have more, I'll hit you anyway. Yes, you will maybe slowly attrition me down. Maybe I will not fight so well. You got spears or pikes, so you're going to do just fine with your support attacks. But even if not, I will outclass you on objectives for quite a while. That's all I need. Since this unit's goal is to go and do something, this is the unit that I want earlier. Because this one, on that, say, turn 3, will have enough move to be on an objective, this unit making its way up. When it gets to turn 4, when they've left to go do something good, now this one is finally sitting on it. So your objective units, unless you have a good reason, I don't care about them early. If they don't come in till like turn 4, that's fine. When I'm getting to choose, some autos, those aren't the ones I'm auto choosing. The reason I would pick it, if my scoring unit has a character that I really want. If it's a fighty character, that's fine. That can usually wait. If it's a magic character or a shooting character, I usually want them earlier because they'll be able to affect the game state earlier. Or if it's a character that buffs me in some way. Thing specifically, say, Sorcerer Kings, where my characters are the way that I get my power. Yes, those units come in early, but otherwise my scoring units come late. It's my blocks of things. It's my cav. It's the things that I want to actually do board things that are going to actually show up early. So often for my scorers, their goal is to line up either centered or off-center, usually off-center, closer to the edge. Now, I know that gives some potential for the enemy if they're over on the side to hit you with a flank. However, with that, because the scorers are trying to hold the back objectives, that does mean if these ones do want to come on, it will be a little bit tougher. They're going to have to, rotate, come on, maybe another round to get close enough. That could give you enough time and spacing here to give a little bit of a unit yourself. I know some of the units are coming in at different times, but the point of this is just to kind of show. You could have your own unit that you decide that you want to support them with, coming in from either the edge, rushing forward, or coming in from the flank to be able to deal with the opponent that is then looking to hit your score in their flank. So it gives you some options. So that's what I'm thinking for my small scoring unit. When do I use the side? So again, let's say, the unit's here. Here is my reinforcement line, then sitting right across here. When do I use it? I use the reinforcement line when it's far enough forward to matter, or the unit is fast enough that they care. What I find, and I think I said this in the last video, but it bears repeating. If your unit doesn't have Vanguard, say your light unit, that turn that they come in, that first turn, they're not going to set your lineup far enough for it to be worthwhile in almost every scenario. Unless the scenario is an objective right near the edge that's kind of far up. Maybe then. Other than that, no. Whoever's coming in turn 2 is coming in from board edge. The only time I break that is a shooting unit sometimes will come from the side if the opponent has made a hard push forward. So again, I know this unit might not be able to do it, but that doesn't matter. We're just using them for illustrative purposes. If they've been able on their turns, they're trying to push hard, I might have my shooting unit come from the side because that might get them the distance that they need. So maybe they can hit from here, but they were missing when they came in from the back. Even if it gets a couple extra stands, that could make it worth it. But otherwise, turn 2, I'm basically coming from the back. Turn 3, now we started pushing pretty far up. Keep in mind for this game, the way reinforcement lines work. You look at your furthest forward, back corner. So right now it would be this. Remember, it can't be anywhere over half of the board. Right now it's not, but up to 24. And that line is fine, even if the opponent is somewhere near it, until the opponent crosses. Now they're crossing where my line is. So what I do then, I start walking back to the next unit I have that is the furthest forward where no enemy has crossed. So now my reinforcement line is here. And they push further, happens again. If you're Dweg, you don't care about any of this. It doesn't matter. Keep in mind, the reinforcement line is set at the beginning of the turn. So you put some sort of token, whatever it is, boom, there's my token, let's say, there's my reinforcement line, there's my back edge. This may never be pushed beyond this point, but it can ebb and flow from here. So what I mean by that, if this unit were to pop here, now I'm reinforcing from this spot. If I were to defeat them, anything like that, now I'm allowed to come back up to this spot. I can never pass it. So even if this unit later was moved further forward or anything like that, can't do it there. But I still get it to be here if this was the case. Because my furthest unit forward is up to here, can't be over half the board or can't be beyond the starting point, boom, goes to here. So this is now my reinforcement line. So you'll set it at the beginning, but if you're worried because you have a unit that might get destroyed, say like your squires that we have here, your squires are really great at setting deployment lines or reinforcement lines because they're horses and they're very, very fast. I think they're a 9 move. They're 8 or 9. I don't recall off the top of my head. But that means realistically, they're sitting at 18 or so, and then the following turn they can go up further. They could have you at half the board if they want. So your turn 3, you have that option. Although your opponent might be pushing forward, that's going to push you back. Or the other thing is they could easily get destroyed. But if they can set the line at the beginning and then later they're removed but someone else has moved up, I don't have to move as far back. You don't have to go back to where other units were in the start. You only just set it from a unit at the start. Otherwise, you look at where your units are currently. So if I have a quick unit like this, where I'm setting a very far board edge, now you have some availability, say turn 3, to really want to come in from the side. Where that comes into play strongly, what I find from my own personal tactics that I do, like I said, my objective score is try to line up. I try to put a reasonable piece to the middle and or sides. Here's what I mean by that. If your opponent is pushing a lot of forces from the middle, so let's say here's the reg player, it's got all kinds of stuff in the middle. And again, this one's unbalanced because they only have one objective, so I wouldn't do this. But let's just, for sake of purpose here. If this is the case that they're doing, that is an overwhelming force. I have no interest in fighting it. Realistically, I don't want to. I am going to have to hold something up. And I'm going to have to engage it to an extent. But if they're therefore maybe giving a little bit less on the sides, even a little bit less on the sides early, maybe they'll throw a bunch later. But if that's where they have something less, maybe that's where a bunch of my units are coming in. Maybe this giant brick is not going to go through the middle to go contend with them. Maybe this brick instead will pull along a flank with the only goal of hitting any of these units along the edge, keeping them stuck, hopefully slowly whittling them down, and making it where they themselves are not getting hit in their vulnerable spot. Your larger bricks want to be very careful about their flanks because you got a lot more to hit. I had it actually happen to me the other day. The guy I was playing against, he hit my Freet in the flank. But my Freet were only 1 wide, which means of his however many stands wide he was, he only really got 3 stands. And if you're a much wider unit, that's not really getting you that much. So when you're bigger, that's more of a concern because if the opponent is bigger, they'll be able to hit you easier. They'll hit more of your stands. So that's a sort of a thought process I have with that. If they're pushing a lot of force to the middle, I will push to the sides. If they're pushing to the sides, I will instead usually pick a side to kind of be my hammer side, and then I will put a bit towards the middle. I have no problem in this game giving up positions. Let's say we have these guys here and more units are coming from towards that side. All right, that's fine. I won't reinforce these guys. I'm going to leave them as is. They're going to do their best. Hopefully they do a little something against, say, the Steel Forge, the Fire Automata, whatever happens. But if they're gone, who cares? You get this objective. you get to destroy the marker that's over here. That's fine. If you're willing to commit a lot to a spot, then I instead can commit more to the other spots where I can win it out. If you have multiple units stacked up that I'm not going to be able to beat unless I put a large amount of force, I'm not going to put that force. It's a war, if you want to think about it that way, not a battle. I'm willing to lose this battle over here to win the war, the game, if you want to think about it that way. Also, it makes it a little bit easier to do refuse flanks or refuse the line. Okay, so for anyone who's not a history buff or any of those sorts of things, hopefully I'll do an okay job explaining this. It's not a very tough concept. Oh, they came off their bases. My apologies. They were not attached to their bases. Okay, that's fine. But there we go. What we're talking about when we say refuse a flank or refuse a line. What your opponent wants to do, what you want to do in a spot like this. Let me move that terrain out of my way. What you want to do is your opponent has a line of models, and you want to be able to hit them into a flank. Especially in a case like this, because you would still get all of your attacks. They're getting either lesser saves or rerolling their resolves or something. They're usually losing something if they're getting hit in the flank. Even if it's just that they need to reform to get more hits into you. They're losing something. So the idea of refusing a line or refusing the flank is, if I can see that you're doing that, so I know, let's say I have this. This is my current bits on the board. These guys will show up in a moment. I see that you've taken your unit of, say, Fireforged. There we go. They didn't rotate together. Oh, that's fine. Give me a second. There we go. I put them on an actual stand. Once they're on a stand, this is easier to do. My apologies. I can see with the way you're coming in. You're coming over here. I know your goal is to be lined up for a flank charge. And maybe you already are. Or you're going to be. And I know, okay, the next round, you're going to hit me your goal to, say, in this case, hit these long bows, whatever it is, take them down. If I have another unit coming up, we'll make it these guys. Again, just to kind of make my life simple. The idea of a refuse flank or anything like that is that when your next unit comes up, you're going to come up in a position that's going to force this unit that you use, that would have been on your flank, to not be able to do so. In actual battles, what usually happened, I'm going to just me for a second. What usually happened is your opponent's pushing forward. They are extending beyond the end of your line. So what you would actually do is you would form an L down. So that way when they hit, they're actually hitting fronts. So that's the idea of a refused flank or refusing the line. For our purposes in a rank and flank game, what that could mean is that this unit comes on, or when they get here, that they're coming in at a bit of an angle. They're angling to make sure that if you want to hit, you can hit them not in a flank. I'm guaranteeing they're not in a flank because you might have some rules. You have fluid formation. You could kind of reposition. Maybe you have something that could get you a little bit of something extra out. Make sure that happens. And if you do it correctly, you can deny them from actually being able to hit this. Let's keep in mind the way charging here works. You do measure essentially the min distance. Okay. They're like 5 inches. Oh, your move's plenty, and you roll the d6. They have plenty of move to be able to do that. They get their 90-degree pivot, and they come in. There's a few things that happen in that. One, you can only charge one unit. So if you have 2 units aligned next to each other, you have to pick one. The other one's going to move away a little bit. You can only charge one no matter what. The other key feature here is you may move over friendly unless they're locked in combat, but you may not move over enemy. So in this case, in this particular example, with the 90-degree pivot, not a pivot, sorry, pivot this way. With the pivot, not working. There we go. My apologies. Been a little bit confused. They're not going to actually hit them because their angle is going to miss because they're going to run through these guys. Now, if they happen to have done it in such a way where they could potentially hit, and let's say they were still flank, I'm not going to spend the 5 minutes to finagle this a little bit, but let's say they were still flank. Well, the problem is, either one, if my unit here is too close, they might only be able to hit the tiniest bit. If they can't close the door, because notice this other unit is in the way, they won't necessarily be able to close the door. I'd actually have to close it from the other end. they won't really be able to close the door. Then I have to try, am I able to close the door? And keep in mind, this unit, if they get pushed away from the enemy, they're only pushed away 1 inch. If you're only pushed away 1 inch, that doesn't guarantee that you clear enough space to do everything. There's a chance that the two sides still can't flush out. And if neither side can close the door, it's a failed charge. Or even if it's successful, let's say I had this here and they were positioned in such a way that they can still hit me. They're only hitting me with part of one stand. So they got full attacks and then support. That's a lot better than them hitting everything. Or, like I said, maybe instead, because of that bad charge lane, they hit this unit instead. Depending on how they hit them, let's put it that way for a second, they might still either be in my arc, I might be able to rotate to get them in my arc, I might be overhanging in a way where, let's say you're like this, you're not quite touching, where now I can charge into them, or they're hanging over the other side, someone can charge into them. You're making it where your opponent is not necessarily getting the things they want. Your archer units want to try and be protected. There's a few ways to protect. You can protect by having things in front of you, which means you need to be far back enough to be able to have line of sight for shooting purposes. So in a case like this, you need to not be so close that you can't see them because of sizes. So be enough inches back, that way you can actually see the other unit. Or if someone's going to try to get to the side, you need something else to protect those sides. Whether it's protecting them this way or having something heavy waiting in the wings for either early or late to be able to smack them. So if they either kill you or don't quite take you out, you can punish them for that. Other thoughts about for coming in, pay attention to your terrain. Be aware that terrain on the side, like I said, it's going to remove things like impact, inspireds, and all of those. I had it happen to me the other day. I was bringing on my Rakshasa, and if I wanted him from the side, and I kind of did, means he lost a lot of his strength, his rules to make him stronger, which can be a big thing. I personally, if we're doing like player place terrain, I like putting some forests or those type of things, like, hindering all that kind of stuff near the edges, because then that means your flanks aren't just free and clear. You actually have to think about using them, or about getting past them first and then doing something with it. Cav especially, I either come in from a flank, because their goal is to hit into the flank of the opponent or hit along one edge, or I do often bring my Cav into the middle. The idea for Cav into the middle, just clearing out some space here. The idea for Cav into the middle, I find, is that it gives them the best target. So if I'm looking at something like this and my Cav is in the middle, since my Cav, especially in say this case, don't mind moving and charging, I can be reasonably far back, reasonably safe, or at least safe from your charges, because I'm fine with charging and fighting, and my charge distance tend to be longer. But now I have choices. You could hit here, there. They might have another unit that has either come in. This is a unit where if you're potentially in the charge range, they'll go early in the round for me. Otherwise, they're one of the last activations I'll do, because I will let you either move forward, I'll let you do whatever your pieces are to give me more options, or at least to force you away. Depending on the army, if yours is one that can manipulate better, so when we think of Sorcerer Kings using Elemental, having a ritual go and then Elemental unit, 3 actions, that means move, charge, assault. So I've essentially doubled my charge ranges. On the base move level, of course. If you're thinking Cav, you have much further charge range, especially if your bigger part is impact. Again, it's nice to get the attacks as well, but if I can avoid getting hit, and I can guarantee I hit you for something, that's better than you hitting me. I don't mind giving my opponent, that long bomb 6-inch charge. And obviously sometimes they have much better charges, but I'll give them that if I'm more okay with the way my unit goes, if they don't mind moving, hitting because of impact and things like that, or I'll just stay away. In a case like this, like I said, they're faster. I will stay outside of your charge range, and then I'm going to try and go last, because if I'm going much later, if you pull forward, now I can do both, or maybe you don't pull forward. You therefore are not moving yourself forward. You're not progressing your reinforcement line, or you're not pushing onto objectives, or you're not really getting in my way. And that's fine. There's a chance this unit then doesn't do anything, especially if it's sitting on an objective. It's in a good position. If I'm holding you back, I'm absolutely fine with that. because now I'm getting my board state up better. So that might have gotten a little bit off the topic of where to come in. What I will say is keep in mind, if you're a heavy unit, you may only come in from the back on your turn 3. Takes till turn 4, you come onto the side. Keep in mind that when you come in the side, your opponent can as well, so be very careful when you choose your units to come in. I had it the other day happen. I had a Rakshasa come in from the side, from over here. He had a unit of Incarnate Sentinels come in from the side, facing enough to be able to see me. However, I was rotated because there was some tasty units in front of me I wanted to hit. He was able to see me, charged in, destroyed me. Even though I actually went over a terrain feature much like this, didn't get his impact, didn't get inspired, it was still enough. So it's important of where you come in. It's also very important when. If I'm a shooting unit, they might come in a little earlier. Anyone else, if it's an early round, my objective holders will start walking up. They'll be some of my first activations, solely because they're not going to get close enough. And like I said, they're going to just come straight up. That's their only goal. For my more specialized units, especially if it's a cav option, something that has a lot of mobility, I want to wait till at least the middle, if not the end, to make you have committed to figure out where they go. My unit that is more of an anvil is probably more center or off center. I'm going to take some of my either shooting units or my heavier brute units, and their goal, not necessarily heavy, is in terms of classification, just harder hitting. Their goal is to push from a flank. In a game, I often will put something to both sides, but that's about it. So in other words, much like I said before, if I got one unit over here, maybe they'll come in from the flank, and they're the only ones that ever do. And then I push about this side over and heavier on this flank. I'll put multiple things to this flank. And I'll do that depending on what you're putting down there. Maybe it's things I don't care to deal with. Maybe it's things I can't deal with. Maybe you are seeming to overcommit too much. Then I'll just go to the other side. I'll let you have that. I'll still put something there because I don't want you just being able to either push straight across into me to potentially hit my flanks. And I want to be able to keep you honest. I find part of a game like this is also the mental part. And when you put a scary unit, a Crimson Tower, if you put Crimson Tower on a side, your opponent is probably going to want to engage them. They're going to want to do something about it. They're going to say, oh, those guys are a problem. I need to put some units that can deal with them. Or I got to put some chaff in the way. Or, I'll try to avoid it, but I have to be honest about them. So I have to make sure as I'm coming on that, how close am I to those guys? Do I need to pivot towards them as I'm moving forward just to make sure they're not getting my flanks? Because they hit my flank here and they'll just run roughshod across my army, facing sideways the whole time. All that sort of stuff matters. So I will at times put a single heavy unit, maybe from my reinforcement, say something like this, over on this side. And their goal is, do you feel like dealing with them? Or if not, they're fast, they'll push forward. So that's a little bit of the thought I have with those sort of things. What I will say then, just to summarize some of these bits, and I know a little bit's a little meandering, but that's kind of the way I see these sorts of things. And obviously we can come up with 1,000 different scenarios of what you should do. When you're trying to analyze where to come in with your units, if it matters greatly to you where they come in, delay that choice. Have them be something that goes later. It works better in early rounds because the earlier the round, the more units you probably have coming in, but the less likely it is that units are interacting in a very meaningful way. Turn 2, there's very little interaction unless both sides had lights that moved really quick. Or maybe someone had a really good shooting unit. Someone has marksman clones or something like that. Something that shoots a very far distance. But otherwise, you're probably not interacting much in turn 2. Which means my units that are already on the board are probably okay just to push forward at least a little bit. So maybe my units that are coming on can delay. Or if it's my objective holders, they'll go first. Because I know what they're doing. If it's a cav unit, like I said, I'm waiting a little bit. because I want you to have to commit something, push somewhere, give me an idea. In a lot of the armies, this is the cases where I'll just have the characters go first just to burn activations. Like I said, unless they're a caster, going to do something good for me. Personally, I've liked my casting type characters in effectively objective holders, because then when they're in, the objective holder can move, then the caster goes. That's 2 activations. That pushes it further back on the opponent. So, for the units that truly matter, especially say turn 2 or maybe turn 3, they're some of the last ones to go for me. And they're some of the last to go. The only reason they wouldn't be the last to go is if I really need them to come in from a reinforcement line, and I'm worried about you engaging and getting past my reinforcement line. Then earlier. But otherwise, they're going to go pretty late. And they're going to go potentially to the back if they're fast enough, or if it's worthwhile. Oh, sorry. Accidentally hit something there. Or they're going to come in from a flank, say one of the sides here, because they're lined up and teed off against something that I want to hit. I don't use the flanks unless I have a reason. The idea being, unless you're really pushed forward, it doesn't necessarily save you much move. It can do a lot for you, but if your line isn't 18, 20 some inches forward, it's probably not doing you much of anything. If it's only like 10, 11 inches up, it ain't doing you much good at all. And if you push from the side, you're nowhere near the middle, far end, anything like that. You're pretty far, which means you might not be able to interact as much. If that unit comes in early, like I said, if I put Crimson Tower in here early, if that's what my opponent does, I'm not deploying anywhere short of this end of the board. What's that? Almost about 30 inches. I'll probably make a 30-inch dead zone for any more deployments. Everyone else comes in over this side. And whoever's on the edge is going to face this way a little bit. Or maybe I try, if they put a hard enough angle, maybe I do try to come in and just try to not be seen and just kind of row up right along the edge. That's the only other thought that I would do. Otherwise, I'll let them have that part of the board. That's fine. You can have this objective. You're either going to let these guys sit here and score some points, but then I don't have to worry about all of this problem, or you're going to push past it to come and get me. Now I can move. Now I'll have a unit just try to run its way up. I'll have them come in potentially from a flank to come through. And again, they might not be able to come from there because of the positions, but this is more of just a logical argument sort of thing. So you're trying to, in any war game, there's this idea of you want to be the one acting, not reacting. I want to be setting the pace. I want to be making decisions that makes you choose, not that I have to make a decision off of your choice. That's a pretty good strategy. Although when you're choosing where to come in, I still think you have to actually, and a lot of times, depending on just who won that initiative, you will be reacting. But I'd rather react to your deployments. And the way I'll react best is if I have more information. If I can delay nicely, if I can wait for important units, if I can line up and get charges in when I need them to tie you down so that way my other units are safer for wherever they wish to come in. Now I can come in on that flank where maybe you had a unit nearby that, if you waited long enough, maybe you could actually hit me, but nope, now I'm into you. You can't. So don't feel you have to use the reinforcements on the edges. Don't just use it because it's, but I can start like 13, 15, 18, 20 inches up the board. Yeah, but if you're on the side, it's not going to help you in your objective. It's not going to help you with what you want to do. Don't bother with it. Just come in from the end. There's nothing wrong with coming in from the end. Remember, this game, I usually always have this idea of turn 4 is when you're actually playing Conquest. It's really turns like 4, 5, 6. 4, 5, 6 are where the game really starts to happen. It happens after that, of course. But before that, it's really jockeying for position, which is a bit of what we discussed here. But that means in those turns, I don't mind if it takes me an extra turn to get into position, if it's going to put me in a much better position. If coming in from the flank, but you really need me halfway across the board, I'm not going to get there. But if I come in from the back middle, I'll get there a turn earlier, 2 turns earlier. I'll do that. Not everything's going to engage all at once, so I'm fine. If that thing would rather wait the extra turn, maybe you do take out one of my units, but you took out one of my units by your activation. Now you're done activating. That means now I have impunity to come in. those sort of things are sort of the thoughts. So that's probably a good way to kind of put this. Consider, where do you want your units? What is the unit's purpose? If their purpose is objectives, line them up for those only. If their purpose is something else, they can grab the objective on the way through, or potentially be hitting the, instead of the objective zone, the objective base, to start getting wounds on it on the way through. And when you're worrying about flanks, you don't have to worry about both. Keep in mind your opponent can do flanks as well. So never position a unit in such a way that you're offering for free your opponent to get into your flank just by using the flank side. Because then what you're saying is, I better win that roll off to go first in the following round. Otherwise, I'm hitting the flank and I might be using my unit, depending on what they're hitting you with, or depending on what they're hitting. So those are overall my thoughts when I'm trying to think about where to actually place my units. Now, again, depending on what your opponent's going to do, it's really going to change what you do. But that gives an overall idea. Now, like I said, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be editing the battle report that Steve and I did. And I'm going to edit in such a way just to discuss why I made the choices that I did. Why did I see what he was doing? Where did I go? Why did I want to do that? Why, when I was taking the flank, did I? Why, when I didn't bother with it? Any of that. Spots where I was trying to do this refused flank or refused the line maneuvers. Where am I doing these things? So I want to put that together. I don't know exactly when. Throughout this, honestly, I haven't been in any pain. So I know I can sit and edit. I can work on that. But I have a few things going on this weekend, as well as like next week. I'm on vacation for the whole later half of the week. So if it's not done early in the week, it wouldn't come out till the week after, because I'm going to be away for like all of Memorial Day weekend, effectively. So you should be seeing that. There's some other videos related to this that I plan on doing. I'm still going to have some other people from our local area come on to talk about list building with different factions that they're more familiar with than I am, because I think that's, good to get it from other people. One other thing I should mention that will be happening in the somewhat near future. I don't know exactly when, I'll be honest. My hope, again, is for it to happen maybe next week. All right, pause briefly there to be able to pull this up. So, friend of the show, the Yellow God, he runs a Twitch account, and him and he's a local to the stores and all, and a friend of mine. We were sitting, he was doing a stream the other day talking about different war games and everything like that, and kind of ranking them and saying, oh, there's a bunch of these, he just didn't know, and that makes sense. I don't think he's only been in since about 40k 9th edition, which we're going back like 4 or 5 years-ish, that sort of time frame. And I was chatting with him, he was on there, and he put some games in that he's like, oh, I don't know any of these games. And I said, okay, well, here's what we'll do. On your Twitch channel, we're going to pick a game we're going to play on TTS, and then live, I'll teach you that game, because I know a lot of the games on the list. And I said, okay, and then live, we're going to put something on our YouTube channel, where I'm going to teach you the game, but we'll do that in person. So he picked, for the live teaching, which will be Conquest. So I'm going to run him through probably about 1,000-point game, and I'm going to do it as a teaching game. We're going to put that out, and that'll hopefully be a good resource for anyone else who's looking to see both learning how to play the game and everything like that. But we're going to go through and do that. The other thing that we're going to do is him and we are actually going to end up playing Halo Fleet Battles, which is a defunct game from a defunct company, Spartan Games. That was the one that he picked. He said, you know what? I want to play one of these Halo ones. I said, let's play that one, because I know some history and some things around that game. So we're going to be playing that. So that'll be coming out hopefully soon at the time of this recording, maybe the following week. So I'll post up about it. So if anyone want to watch the two of us play an old dead game, the old God, he's the one who's going to have that up there. So we're going to have that, and we're going to go through that. And that's going to be a lot of fun, honestly. I've looked through it. It's a bit of a mess, and that sounds interesting to me. But we're also going to be doing some stuff with Conquest. So thank you for watching, listening, all that kind of stuff. If you have thoughts for any videos that you would like to see, any content you want to see related, especially related to Conquest, like I said, I do a lot of the Conquest stuff on my own because I record it whenever I feel like. Where, like, the 30K stuff, I need the other guys for that, and that limits when we can do it. If something came up, like the other day, I was having trouble sitting, so I was not going to be able to record a 2.5-hour show. So we're going to record this week otherwise. But if there's anything Conquest related that you guys want to see, let me know. It can be as general for new players or as specialized as you want. I do want to get back to doing more unit reviews and all those sort of things, but I wanted to make something a little bit more open to everyone, because like I was doing most recently unit reviews for Old Dominion. If you don't play Old Dominion, it doesn't necessarily matter much to you, or if they're not in your meta, who cares? Unless you just like enjoy listening to me talk, and that's fine, you're allowed to. But otherwise, like, you're just not going to bother. But a video like this could work for anyone. So especially if you have video ideas of what you want to see that could relate to anyone, please let me know. My goal is to make the things that people find interesting. I don't know exactly what it is that people want discussed, or maybe what they don't feel comfortable with, or what they just want to hear someone else talk about and either agree with or disagree, because that's just as important. So just let me know. As we said, if you want to buy anything Conquest, we have our code Train Kickers down in the show notes below. We also do have a Patreon. Like I said, especially on this though, I push that instead. You can get models, you can save money, helps us out, and you have something extra to show for it. But we do have that Patreon as a just in case as well. My hope is to start putting some content behind it, although it'll be more timed exclusive rather than always exclusive. We were going to do it with some battle reports, and then my legs decided to hate me for a while, so I wasn't able to do that. But we're kind of getting back, so we'll be getting back to some of that as well. We'll have some more 30k stuff. We'll have some other game stuff. There's a chance we actually might see A Song of Ice and Fire as well, because I'm playing a little bit of that, and I did pick up a Mother of Dragons box for like $10. And Targaryens was always the faction I enjoyed in that game. So you might see a little bit of that as well. All right, well, that belabors all enough of these points then. On behalf of everyone here at the show, then, have a good hobby and some great gaming.